So let's talk about critique. A little bit of backstory before we begin. My name is Chris. I go by Future online. I am a college student and an artist. I am also a mod on the RedLineStation on Tumblr and Twitter, which is a blog dedicated to helping artists through tutorials and redlines of their submitted artwork. Redlining is essentially going over somebody's artwork, traditionally with red pen, and pointing out errors. Usually this is to catch anatomy mistakes, but we also help artists on pretty much anything like clothing and lighting and composition. You can also find the RedLineStation blog in the link in my description. I've been a mod on the RedLineStation for over 3 years now. It is a volunteer position. I'm not being paid. This is not an advertisement. I really enjoy being a part of it. I really enjoy helping young artists, and I've always had a huge investment in learning. I've been in a lot of art servers during my time as an artist. I've done a lot of critique, both online and in person, going to art classes at my local college. And over the course of the years, I've noticed a few things that can be detrimental to the experience and the process of critique. So here I am to teach you proper form on how to give and receive critique. Always ask or get permission. Unsolicited critique is worse than no critique, in my opinion. The reason you always ask is just because it's polite. I see a lot of unsolicited critique on the internet, but I've also experienced it in real life. When I was younger and I'd be drawing in my sketchbook, there would always be somebody coming up to me and I'd get comments about how things look weird or how somebody doesn't like the way I drew the hair or the eyes. And it's really none of their business. It's just common courtesy that if you have nothing nice to say, then don't say it. This also applies online. Just because somebody has posted their art online doesn't give anybody free rein to give unsolicited critique. But you might be saying, hey, if somebody has posted their artwork online, it's free for anybody to comment on and talk about. And that's true, I guess. But it's the same as if somebody were to show you their artwork in real life. It doesn't mean that they want you to be picking it apart and critiquing it, especially if this is a very small artist. Like if it's a large established artist who is trying to sell you their art as a product, then you as the consumer have a right to review the product that you have bought or would be willing to buy. But if it's just like a random small artist on the internet who's just posting their artwork for fun, think about your priorities here. Why do you want to critique this person? Why do you want to give them this advice, especially if you don't know them? Is it truly to help them in hopes of bettering themselves? Or are you just doing it because of your own ego? An artist may decline or not want any critique for any reason, and that's completely valid. An artist does not owe you to listen to your critique. Again, if this is not a very large and established artist who is trying to market their art, there is no reason for them to accept critique from a total stranger. They may have art friends that they're getting advice from. There's no reason they should listen to you. And if you must offer critique, you should always ask first. And the best way to do that is in private DMs or messages or whatever the structure is on the platform you're on. And if they decline, then it's fine. Just move on. There's no reason you should be putting someone publicly on blast to point out flaws in their artwork under the guise of helping them. By not respecting a person's wishes to not receive such critique, you may discourage them from asking for it in the future because you have embarrassed and shamed them, and that's not a good feeling. If you have nothing nice to say, then don't say it. How to ask. State your intention. You will not believe the amount of people who, when they go to these art servers and they ask for critique, it's always super vague. It's always like, can I get critique on this? Or can you help me fix this? Or do you see anything wrong with it? And that's not a very effective way to ask for critique. Why? Because you want your critique to be tailored to you. And when you ask this very vague question, it's hard for the person critiquing to really hone in on what you mean. And In my opinion, this wastes a lot of time in order for the critic to go back and forth asking about what the artist was trying to do or what was the reference. If you give all of these things up front, it saves a lot of time and you get your critique in a very concise way. This is also why artist statements can be helpful, but that's a whole different video. Now, when stating your intention, it's important to be clear. Here are 3 things that you can use as a checklist, but obviously over time, as you get more comfortable presenting your artwork, you can be more robust in your explanations of your process and inspirations. So, here are the 3 things. Number 1, what would you like the critique to focus on? If your intention is to get better at the fundamentals such as anatomy and perspective, then of course you want to ask about that. But the problem is, if you don't state your intention, the critique will usually default back to the fundamentals if other people don't know what you mean to focus on. If you don't want comments about the proportions or anatomy or all of that, then you need to state that clearly. There are stylistic choices that we don't want to compromise as artists, and that's perfectly fine. You just need to state what you actually want the critique to focus on. Number 2, your references and inspiration. This can be as simple as the photo reference that you're using or a certain artist's style that you want to emulate. This can also help you process through yourself on how your inspiration shows through your work. You don't want it to be complete plagiarism, but when we see our inspirations in our work, it can feel very gratifying. Number 3, what is it you hope to convey? If you're doing studies of fundamentals, then what you're hoping to convey is whatever you're studying. For example, if you're doing head studies, what you want to convey is the realistic and accurate representation of the head. But if you're doing an independent art practice, what matters more is the story that you're trying to tell or the emotion you want to convey. Those are far more important than the technical aspects of your art. If you can get your emotion and story across, then you have done a good job. And the reason it's so important to state this is to get an outsider's perspective on whether you have achieved that goal. And if you haven't, what could you do to improve the art to achieve your goal? How to give critique. Focus on intention. A lot of times when I see people giving critique, they focus a lot on the fundamentals. They tell the person to go back and study the fundamentals, to do these exercises on the fundamentals, and it gets to the point where they're not even talking about the work anymore. All we're talking about is fundamentals. Now, what I'm going to say may be a little controversial, but in my opinion, you don't need the fundamentals when you're starting out. That sounds a little bit contradictory, like why wouldn't you need the fundamentals? They're the foundation upon which you build the rest of your drawing experience. Kind of, but that's not what I think. I think you should approach the fundamentals when you're ready to advance yourself to that higher degree of drawing. But you don't need to practice the fundamentals right when you're beginning. I do think that there's something to be said for having the breathing space, for creativity and drive to develop to the point where you feel ready and you say, yes, okay, I have gone as far as I can. I have learned how to walk on my own 2 feet, and now I'm ready to take it to the next level, to approach the fundamentals and study them. Because at the end of the day, art should be about what you get out of it. And if what you want is to get better at anatomy and perspective, if you have that drive, then you're ready. But some people just aren't. And that's fine, especially if you're only like 11, 12, 13 years old. Because if you aren't going into the fundamentals with 100% of your focus, if it's a chore and it's boring and you find yourself not getting anything that any of these people are saying to you, then it's going to be very hard. And you're super likely to burn out. The best way, I would say, to gauge yourself if you're ready or not is if you don't feel pressured to do these things from outside forces. You just internally, intuitively want to do these things. Like you actually want to do figure drawing and it's actually fun. That's where you're going to get the most out of your time. There's nothing wrong with just drawing for the sake of drawing when you're starting out, because it is at that moment, it is that time where you're building the mental capacity to be able to advance. And if you have no drive and there's no heart and soul in it, then that is going to show in your artwork and in your mental health. This was a big tangent, so let's go back to how to actually give critique. So number 1, state what is successful about the piece. Now, a lot of times during critique, people focus on the negatives without stating any positives, and stating what is successful about a piece can be just as helpful to the artist as stating what they need improvement on, because it is telling them what their strongest points are, and therefore they can use this information to contrast that against their weaknesses. I usually like to start out my critiques with a compliment. If this is an artist that I've talked with before, I might find some underlying themes or techniques in their work that I admire or that I would like to see more of, because a lot of times artists do things that are very subconscious and need other people to point out to them in order to appreciate their own artwork more. And it's just a nice thing to do. Number 2, what can be improved? Now, this is probably going to be the bulk of the critique. After all, this is what we're here for, to help other people improve their artwork. So, stating what can be improved, what mistakes you might see, this is pretty straightforward. Now, if you're not sure about something, it's better to say that you don't know than to give any definite advice, because giving wrong advice can be worse than giving no advice. One of my biggest gripes here is wording, and wording can be very important to your meaning. I know some people have very blunt ways of speaking, and I'm not asking them to change, but the meaning is a little different between when you're saying somebody's artwork is very bad versus saying their artwork can be improved upon. It's all about the wording. Number 3, provide or offer additional resources. Trust me, one of the best things you can do during a critique is to provide additional resources. What I learned most during my time in my art classes was getting recommendations of all of these different artists and being exposed to so many different genres of art that I didn't know about before. Recommend artists you know, both contemporary and historical. It's about being exposed to these kinds of resources. And this is what critique is all about. It's about being exposed to new people and different points of view. So if you can give anything during a critique, it is helping someone find that new appreciation for a different kind of art, or something that they may not have looked up before, but would be right up their alley. So any kind of guidance in that direction is going to be the lasting impact of your critique. Last, how to receive and respond to critique. A worrying amount of young artists have this tendency to self-deprecate and self-depreciate their art. They will put up their art for critique in an art server or forum or group, and they will say something like, this isn't my best work. That's putting it mildly. Usually they go to extremes and say something like, please destroy my artwork. I know that it's trash. This is the worst drawing in the history of art. Just give me everything you've got, because I know it's terrible already. And this is not a productive way to think about your art. And it really discourages me personally from doing the critique to its fullest, because I want to focus on the actual problems behind that sort of mentality and make sure that you're okay. And a lot of people will say, oh, it's just a joke, or it's a way of being humble to not appear as if you're bragging about your art. But to self-flagellate like this, to put your own artwork down before it's even got a chance to be looked at or reviewed, is to disrespect not only yourself, but the person doing the critique as well. If you were going to a job interview and you said, oh, you shouldn't hire me because I'm the worst worker and I have terrible work ethic, then of course they're not going to hire you. If you came up to me and threw your sketchbook on the table and said, don't even bother saying anything nice about it, it's all trash, what incentive are you giving me to continue with the critique? to give you my time when it sounds like you don't even like your own work. And I think this is, in a large part, it has nothing to do with art, and it has more to do with the way that you're thinking about yourself. A lot of it is insecurity around your own skill, and I understand. I had the same thing when I was younger and in high school, and I also felt very insecure about my art. And I would cover that up with humor, and the kind of humor that I had was this self-deprecating, not very nice humor. And you can see the cycle of this. And as someone who has broken out of that cycle, I'm telling you, if you find yourself doing this, to just be kinder to yourself and be proud of where you are and look forward to where you're going. Other people will appreciate your art, and I'm sure there's already lots of people appreciating you, and you just need to show that you appreciate it as well. And of course, always remember to thank the people giving you the critique. And it's also nice to offer to look at their art as well. This is not a one-way transaction unless you're in a classroom setting or a portfolio review setting. In a peer critique, you should offer to look at their art. The way that this community grows is by everyone coming together and just celebrating art. And of course, I want to thank you for watching this video and making it all the way to the end. If you have any critique for me or want to discuss anything I said in this video, please feel free to put it in the comments. I'll try to answer everybody depending on how many comments I get. I just wanted to promote the discussion of artistic critique, especially peer critique, in order to create a better environment for everyone in the art community. Learning and teaching is a great passion of mine, and I would like to do more of these videos talking about things that you might not find outside of a traditional artistic education. I feel like nobody talks about critique. Everyone just thinks that it's something intuitive, but it is also a skill you need to learn. And there are ways that it can be done poorly and ways where it can be done very well. So yeah, I hope this video is helpful. Please check out the RedLineStation in the description below, as well as my other social media links, and I'll see you in the next video.